Alright, so today we're going to be talking about the tools that Photoshop has. Now there are a lot of tools in Photoshop, and you look at your toolbar right now and you're not even scratching the surface. Now we're going to talk about a lot of the tools today. We're not going to talk about every tool. There are tools you're going to use every day in this program. There are tools you're going to use once a month. There are tools you're never going to use unless you're in very specialized fields. So we're going to talk about the most common tools and the tools you'll hit every here and there as well. So in the document today, you're going to notice that we have a large list of tools on the left-hand side. Understand that each tool you see there is just a touch of the tools that you have in your overall toolbar. So if I were to click and hold on any of these tools, I would see that I have more tools underneath them. There are a lot of tools in the set. I don't want to overwhelm you. You don't need them all. So we're going to talk about the major ones today, and we're going to do a few exercises along the way to get you ready to use these tools properly. So like with all of my tutorials, the tutorial layers panel is going to be a hair complicated, so we need to look at that first. We have multiple artboards going on today. Some of them are blank, there's nothing in them. There is one red locked one, that is that toolbar on the left. No need to worry about that. As we are moving through, when we finish one of these artboards, feel free to lock it so you don't make a mistake on it later. Make sure it's open when we're working on it, and then move through the general setup here. So let's back up and look at our first artboard. Now our first artboard has this gradient over top of it, and I want to get rid of that gradient for the time being. So I'm going to go to my layers panel, and I'm just going to turn off the gradient fill so that I can see this model that's underneath. Now in Photoshop, a lot of people have this thought pattern of this image looks good, there's nothing more I can do to it, but that's not true. There's always more you can do to it. So we're going to move through the tools and kind of look at what we can do to make this image a little better. Now the first tool in the set is called the Marquee tool. M is the shortcut. There is a circular or elliptical one and a rectangular one. So I want you to click on the rectangular Marquee tool and draw a square right here in the document. Now if you clicked and dragged, you likely didn't make a perfect square. You can see the width and height that's right there. If you held shift as you do that, you do make a perfect square. Now adding shift when this is already created, we'll put a little plus symbol underneath your icon. And by clicking and dragging again, you can add to your selection. Now this works for most tools. So anytime you're dealing with a selection, if you want to add to it, hold shift. Now in reverse, if you want to subtract from it, you're looking for Alt or Option. Alt or Option will subtract from that general selection that you have. You can subtract as much or as little as you want. Anytime you have a selection like this and it's in your way, Control or Command D will deselect that. Now, these tools are fairly simple, and there's a lot of uses for them. It's just up to you to experiment and kind of find those uses. In a future lesson, we'll use this circular Marquee tool a lot. So grab that elliptical Marquee tool, hold Shift, drag out a few more of those, hold Option, subtract from some of those areas. Now the next set of tools in the set are really the lasso tools, but they've thrown the selection brush in here as well. These are ways to kind of free draw your selections. So with the selection brush, if I were to click and drag, kind of covering this area, it's going to mark it with this pink area. Now when I get off of that tool, it'll make the selection that I have. So that gives me options to kind of free draw out my selection. With that tool, you can see options for opacity and your brush sizes at the top. Remember that every one of these tools has different options in the options bar to kind of play around and tinker with. The lasso tools allow you to click, hold, and drag to create your selection. So I want you to use that tool to click right underneath this pinky finger here on that flame, hold and drag to create a selection that shows the lighter areas of her face only. So kind of going around that eye, back around here to this location at the flame, going back to the beginning. Now, when you create selections like this, It can be a little daunting with the mouse if you're not good with moving the mouse around or you have limited space at your workspace. This can create kind of an issue for you. I use this tool pretty regularly, but it's not really my go-to for certain things. I prefer a different lasso tool most of the time. So I'm going to hit Command D and deselect that area. Now, the polygonal lasso tool does a similar thing, but it moves in straight lines, which makes it a little easier to control. So what we're going to do is we're going to start under the pinky. I'm going to click one time. I'm going to click over here in this black area, and then I'm going to go up to the face. Now, each time I click, it gives me a pivot point that I can kind of move around from. And I'm going to use this to kind of click, 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 click all the way around this face, marking the lighter areas of this face. Kind of like that. I'm going to go back to the flame. Now, the real trick here is when you get to the end, make sure that you hit that little circle button. You see how it turns into a circle when you go back to your first click? When you click on that, it'll lock that selection into place. That's what I want. Now, what a lot of you are probably going to do is get real lost in the sauce here. You're going to start clicking. You're going to forget where you clicked at originally. You might accidentally go over it. And now you're going to be sitting here clicking like this, not knowing what to do to fix this. This is definitionally lost in the sauce. If it looks like this, double click real fast. That'll close it. Hit Command D, try it again. Because it's one of those things where if you don't do it right, you're going to end up with a big mess on your hands. Now, once you have this selection made, and it's sitting here covering the right side of her face where it's lit up, I want to do a couple of things to make this image look a little better. So she's staring at a flame. The right side of her face is lit up, but it's not lit up well, right? So I want to brighten that area. So I want you to click on where it says model, have the model layer selected. And we're going to add an adjustment layer to this layer. So down at the bottom, make sure that you find that half black, half white circle and go to the word exposure. This is an adjustment layer called exposure. Now when I do that, it's going to open up my properties panel. So if you look in your layers panel, you're going to notice that you have an adjustment layer that now has a layer mask matching what you drew out. Now, going to the properties panel with this, if I go to the exposure option, I can push the exposure up and that's going to brighten the side of her face. So I'm going to go pretty bright. I'm going to go to like +2 on that. As I do that, I want to avoid these other sliders. You can see they kind of create issues along the way. And I want you to look very carefully at the image that you've created. So if you look, you can very clearly see that line that we drew out. And that's not a good look. I don't want that to be happening. So I want to fix that issue. If you click on the mask in your layer, it's going to open up something different in your properties panel. You'll get an option for that layer mask for density. This is how well you can see through it. You also get the option for feather. Feathering is how faded that line is. So instead of having this sharp, crisp layer mask that looks like this, if I were to feather it out a little bit, it starts to fade that edge a little bit. So it's not as sharp a line. And when I do that correctly, I get a nice subtle fade onto her face. Looks cleaner, right? So just using the lasso tool and one adjustment layer, I've been able to pop up that side of the face to go from kind of flat and drab to much more vibrant, much more dramatic, right? Now, if you will, grab that gradient fill and let's turn that back on. I want to go back and look at blending modes real quick. If you look at your blending modes called normal right here and kind of play around with these blending modes, you can see how we can add a lot more drama to this image, playing around with blending the colors down to the image below. I like the one called hue in this scenario. I think that gives a good amount of color without going over the top, but feel free to experiment and pick something different that you like, right? So that's just using a basic selection right there, a blending mode and an adjustment layer. So being able to make that selection to pop out that one side of the face really went a long way with this image. So let's go over to the right. I'm going to close up the Marquee and Lasso and lock that layer and move down to the selection and fills. I will select that beach layer. So let's have that beach layer selected. Now this is an image of a beach, right? And anytime we're at the beach, it's easy to take pictures of the beach, but sometimes the beaches are crowded and it's hard to like just get what you want. In this scenario, we have these two guys walking down the beach. We also have the ship out here in the wandering area. So we're going to make sure that we have those out. This time I'm going to use my selection brush. Now I'm going to make my brush smaller using the brackets to the right side of P. And I'm just going to click and drag to create a pink area around that ship. I'm going to click to my move tool so I have my actual selection. And to get rid of that ship, I'm going to go up to the top, edit, fill, and I'm going to look for the option that says content aware. There are other options in here, but most of the time you'll be living in content aware. Hit OK. Now when you hit OK, Photoshop's going to read what's in that image and what looks wrong and how it can fix it. Now if I were to just delete that ship, it would cut a hole in my image. That's not a good look either. But by doing edit, fill, content aware, it picks up the pixels around it and guesses at how to fix that area. Cleaner, right? So let's try that again with our lasso tools. And this time you can just use the regular lasso tool. On the guys that are here, I want you to make a selection around them. You don't want to be real close to them. You want to give it a little bit of area on the outside. And try the same thing. Edit, fill, and let's go to content aware again. Hit OK. It makes a pretty good approximation of what that beach should have been. Sometimes you'll notice repeating patterns, maybe a little bit of a blur. Sometimes you'll have pieces of those people kind of left around. Sometimes you have to retouch, right? That's just life in Photoshop. So that cleans up our image. And this is, again, just using the basic selection tools. That's all we've really touched so far. So let's continue that. On that rectangular marquee tool, I want you to put your cursor right at the horizon line. That's where the sky meets the water here. I want to click, hold, and drag to select just the bottom part of this beach image. Now I like this beach image, I'm not mad at it, but the sky is very plain and kind of doesn't have any drama to it. So I want to add some drama to it. So with the bottom half of this image selected, I'm going to click on that layer mask down underneath your layers again. That's going to cut that out, leaving only this background sky image coming through. Now you can look at this and you can say these don't match at all. This looks terrible, and it does, that's fine. But we can do things to adjust this as well. So again, just using the selection tools and some basic adjustments, we can create the images that we wanted. Right here, this ground looks like it's like midday, where up here at the top we've got like a dawn dusk scenario. So click on the beach, and this time we're going to go to the adjustment layers again, that half black, half white circle, and I'm going to look for the option that says color balance. So in color balance, when that pops up, it's going to allow you to adjust the colors of this image. Now before I begin doing it, I want to make sure to link this down. Linking it down makes sure that I don't accidentally change the colors of the sky too. You see, not having it linked down will create issues for both images. So I want to link it. That's this button right at the bottom of the properties panel, or you can hold Alt or Option just underneath color balance to link it down. Now on the color balance, I want to look at the image itself. I have a lot of dark blues, I've got some light blues, I've got some heavy pinks and magentas. So I'm going to push up those midtones. I'm going to bring up the cyan, I'm going to bring up the magenta, I'm going to bring up the blue. And you see how quickly we start to get a very similar feel to the sky. And it's just kind of tweaking it around a little bit. Now I'm only playing with the midtones here. I could certainly be going to the shadows and doing some similar things, going to the highlights, but you get the point, right? So basic things can make very real changes. One last touch I would do is, because this horizon line is very sharp, I might fade the water a little bit. So I'll click on that layer mask for the beach, hit B to get my brush, and I've got a soft round brush. It's about 40 pixels. And I'm just going to click one time over here on the left, hold Shift, and just drag to the right. And it'll create a nice fade up. As long as it's a soft brush, you'll get away with it. It'll look just nice. So again, selection tools, adjustment layers, playing around with your layer masks, These are all some basics inside of Photoshop, and I'm not expecting you to be experts about them now. We're going to continue tinkering with them along the way. I just want you to start getting used to these ideas. All right, let's move down to the girl that's having a bad day here. So on the selections and fills, I'm going to lock that. I'm going to close that. I'm going to open the Healing Tools artboard and click on the skincare image. Now I am bypassing a couple of the tools here. The Magic Wand tool, the Quick Selection tool, the Object Selection tool. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about them, and we already have to a degree. The Object Selection tool is the only one we really haven't talked about yet. And if you kind of grab that and hover over certain areas of an image, you'll see that it kind of selects certain areas of that image, depending on the color, shape, and things that are related to it. Some of these other tools, like the crop tool, we're not going to use very often. Make your documents correct and you won't need it very often. The framer tool is good for certain things. I don't use it very often. Eyedropper tool, I feel like it's very basic. You click, hold, drag, you get the color that you're clicking on. So if you look in your colors panel, or if you look over here in your toolbar, you can see whatever color I click on is reflected there, right? So the eyedropper tool is fairly basic. Now, the girl here is having some issues with her skincare, and we can clean these up very easily. This is everybody's favorite tool in the set. The tools underneath it, I don't use very often. Now, what I'm talking about is the spot healing brush. So the healing brushes in general. There's big business in fixing images, right? And everybody's seen celebrities that were clearly photoshopped. That girl had a bunch of zits walking into that thing and her pictures look stellar. So we're going to play around with a few of these tools, not all of them. The spot healing brush is your main go-to. So grab that. Make sure that you are on the skincare image. Now, if I were to grab one of these zits, click, hold, and drag with my brush, it creates this shadow look on it. When I release, Photoshop is going to guess at what's wrong and attempt to fix it with pixels around it. Now, there are times this is going to come in a little bit blurry compared to some of the other things. It's just about fixing and refixing, right? Touching and retouching. But for a basic fix, not bad, right? If I click again, I get a nice clean look. Now the problem that a lot of people have is they go crazy. They sit here and try to get all of them in one drag. And if you do that, you can see there are some clear issues when you do that. So you want to do this in small bursts along the way. Now for bigger spots that you may have, I want you to go past the remove tool, which removes with a little bit of AI. It paints like a brush, paints like the selection tool, and it uses a little bit of AI to kind of fix what's going on. It can slow your computer down, so I'm going to bypass that and go to the healing brush. Now the healing brush works in much a similar way, but the healing brush, you need to sample good pixels. So I'm going to hold Option or Alt, and I'm going to sample what I want. So this is a good clean piece of skin right here. If I click on that and I go over to the new skin, the skin I want to fix, you see it follows me, right? Now if I click, hold, and drag, it takes the skin from over here and places it in this location. It'll also do a little bit of blending, so it may change the color a little bit as you do this. So if I grab up here again, click and drag, you can see it keeps it a little bit more towards the pink side as I go down. And again, big swatches create problems, so don't do big areas. Moving down, the patch tool. This is for more big areas. The patch tool will fix certain areas that you may need fixed. So if I'm going to go and grab this area right here, I want to patch this whole area of skin. I draw my selection like the lasso tool. I click in the middle of it, hold, and drag it to some cleaner skin. And it's going to attempt to match that cleaner skin as best it can. Again, bigger areas do cause issues along the way. Now going back, there are some options down here for content aware move tool. It will allow you to move things that are in it, make it smaller, bigger. In the red eye detail, we don't really have red eyes like we used to, so it's not really a worry. What I want you to do is take this spot healing brush and go through this image with little clicks, little drags, and clean up the face of this girl. It doesn't have to look perfect. A little better goes a long way. If you make mistakes, Command Z or Control Z will go back. Do be careful not to use this tool on things that are very obvious, because if you do, it makes a big mess. Keep it clean, right? So that cleans up with our healing tools pretty well. Now I will point out underneath this I have the clone stamp tool. Now the clone stamp tool works in much the same way as the healing brush. So if I click on that clone stamp tool, and I'm just going to use her ear here for an example. I can hold Alt or Option, that'll sample pixels. I'll click right on that ear. And you'll notice that that ear follows me. If I make it bigger, you'll see the whole image showing up all of a sudden. Now the clone stamp works in a slightly different way than the healing brush, because the healing brush helps blend the two images together. The clone stamp doesn't care. It just puts the exact pixel in that exact same place that you just clicked on. Okay, so that can fix some small things. It can help clean up. It's one of those to play with. All right, let's move over to the Pupperdoos picture. I'm going to lock the healing brush and open up the photo editing tools, clicking on the Pupper's image. Now I am going to bypass a couple of more tools here. The brush tool, we're going to look at it in a little bit, but I really do a full lesson on the brush tool, so I don't feel the need to go into depth on it. The art history brush, and in fact I'll bring up that healing tool real quick, going back to skincare. So the art history brush and the history brush will bring back what once was in a location. So it'll bring back and get rid of effects that you might have put on. That's good for later down the way, but once you've gone past 30 clicks of the mouse, that tool kind of goes away. The eraser tool, and I'll just use this for an example. It erases things. It's really that simple. The problem with the eraser tools in general is that they erase in a way that completely damages the original image, because it will get rid of pixels entirely. So I don't want you using the eraser tools at all if you can help it. Gradient tools we'll talk about in a moment, but what we're really going to talk about now is the photographic tools, the photo editing tools. So let me lock this back up, open up the photo editing, click on Puppers. Now the photo editing tools are all techniques that photographers used to use in dark rooms, right? There were ways to do this in old school photography. The way we do it now is in simple clicks and drags. So the first one is this little eyedrop shape, the blur tool. And this will blur out whatever you're looking at. So if you look at the background here, it's already pretty blurry. But if I just click and keep dragging over it, you'll see it gets more and more blurry the longer you go. There are options up at the top for strength. You can make the strength 100% and it'll get blurrier faster as you go. But it's just a way to create some depth in whatever you're doing. Feel free to play around with that. The next tool is called your sharpen tool. Sometimes things come in a little bit blurry. You can slightly click on it with this tool to bring it back to a little bit more vibrance. But the sharpen tool is kind of a dangerous tool. So if I click and drag holding up here and I go too far, I start to get this like awkward looking rainbow effect happening. So sharpen can go too far too quickly and end up really distorting your images. This isn't a tool I use at all if I can help it, but certainly not often. Now the smudge tool underneath. I want you to picture your canvas here as wet paint. If I were to click with my finger in this nasty area I just made, hold and drag, I can smudge this background just like it's wet paint, smearing that all in. What uses does that have? Way more than you would think. It is amazing what you can do with the smudge tool in the right scenarios, and we'll look into that. Next one is the dodge, burn, and sponge tools. These are still the photography terms. Dodge is another way of saying lighten, to make brighter. So the dog on the left, the lighter colored one, I want you to click, hold, and drag over to him until he turns into a pure ghost. He is just the whitest dog you've ever seen in your life. Dodging helps bring out highlights in certain things. We wouldn't use it for situations like this, but you can see where it would help brighten little bits of area. Now the next one is called the burn tool, and we're going to take the dog on the right and we're going to burn him until he turns into a silhouette basically, making him so dark you can't really see a lot of the definition. Burning creates depth as well. It helps build contrast. The darker your darks, the brighter your whites, the better your contrast is. Now the last in the photo editing techniques is the sponge tool. The dog in the middle is kind of an orange yellow color. I want you to click on this, hold, and drag over that dog in the middle. The sponge tool reduces the color. It desaturates. It sucks up the color. That's what it's sponge for. So it'll kind of just drag him into a grayscale. So gray him out. Make him look like he's in an old-timey picture. So those are your basic photo editing options. Now, there is the pen tool. We're going to go into the pen tool and look at that. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't use it very often in Photoshop, but it is the most versatile tool in all of the Adobe programs. It is a good tool to have, and it's a good tool to know. Moving past that, the selection tools work in concert with that pen tool. So I'm not going to talk about those very much right now either. The type tool, the horizontal type tool, click type. It is that easy for the most part. But I have a whole lesson on the type tool. We'll spend time on it. The hand tool we've talked about, click, hold, drag. The zoom tool we've talked about, click, hold, and zoom. So let's go down to the bottom. I want you to select the shape experiment artboard. You can lock that photo editing one and go to this shape experiment. Now, with the shapes, we have a lot of different shapes in this program that you can kind of play with. So U is the shortcut for shapes. Why? I don't know. But grab that rectangle shape, click, hold, and drag a tall, skinny rectangle onto your document. It's going to come in whatever color your fill and stroke are up at the top. So change your fill to a different color, and you can see it change. Change your stroke to a different color. You can see this black little line around the outside. You can push your stroke up using this little slide bar. There's also ways to type it in over on your properties panel. There are options for your stroke, whether you want it dashed, whether you want it dotted, or whether you want a solid line. And that's just touching the iceberg on what you can do with these things. If you were to create another shape, so let's go to the ellipse tool and let's make a short little squat circle real quick. It's going to come in the exact same as the last one. So this time, take the stroke off, hit none right here. Change the fill to a different color. And you can distort and change your shapes how you want. Now there is one odd one in the set here, and it's called the custom shape tool. You can make your own custom shapes, but they give you a library of a few different ones. If you click up in your options bar, you will see the different options that you can, or the different shapes that you can utilize throughout. They'll have different trees, boats, flowers, and animals. I don't know who made that decision, but that's a weird set of shapes to me. Grab that second one, the lion, click, hold, drag, and if you hold shift as you drag, it'll make a perfect shape for that lion, and let go. Change the color of that lion to whatever color you want it to be, and that is your basics of shapes. But again, we have a whole lesson of shapes coming. Let's move to the right, and let's select the layer called Gradient Experiment. Now, this one may do something weird right off the bat. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Select the gradient tool, please. And with the gradient tool, if you click, hold, and drag on this option, it will create a gradient for you. Now, there is a possibility that it's going to show up outside of the artboard, in which case it's going to look something like this. If that happens, check your layers, drag that gradient fill onto the gradient experiment, and it'll go right where you want it to be. Now, there are a number of types of gradients in here. Most of you are going to end up on the default gradient, the black to white, looks like this. That's fine. You don't have to have a gradient going any specific direction. You can make it go whatever direction you want it to go by clicking, holding, and dragging anywhere with your gradient tool. You can change the colors by double clicking on these little circles and changing the colors that are at the end. You can click in the dead center of this, just a little bit under this line. You'll see a plus symbol pop up. You can click there to add new colors. Now, you can slide these around so that they look different. You can move them in order. You can play around with these little diamond shapes to how much they fade or how little they fade. Options galore. Up at the top, there are other options for what type of gradient you have. This is a linear gradient, meaning it's moving in a line, left to right, right to left. There is a radial gradient, which moves as a circle out of the center, a angle gradient, a reflected gradient, and a diamond shape gradient. Experiment, come up with something cool. See what you like. Then we're going to go to the brush experiment. Now open that up and make sure I select the brush experiment layer. Now hit B on your keyboard, get your brush tool, click, hold, drag. It's that simple, right? No, it's never that simple. So we can change colors, right? Change colors to whatever you would like them to be. There are also hundreds, if not thousands, of brushes out in the world that you can use. Inside of your brush options up at the top where the size of the brush is, there are general brushes, dry media, wet media, and special effects brushes. These are your default 4, but I will show you how to download thousands of different types of brushes. So what I'd like you to do is kind of experiment with these different brushes. Do be a little careful as you do this because some of these brushes are not brushes. If you look in the very corner of each one of these, it'll look like a brush or it may be an eraser tool. So that one is an eraser tool that erases out. Some of them are smudge tools, so they act kind of goofy along the way. Make sure you go back to your brush tool as you do this. Try out the special effects brushes, see what those look like, change your colors as you do. This is just getting used to the idea of what some of these things do, right? If it's bigger, smaller, what it's going to look like depending on how you create these things. Really, when it comes down to your brushes, it's all about experimentation. You need to learn to experiment with your brushes and not be scared to fail. Failure is how you learn. The tools that we've used today are the main tools that you're going to need throughout this tutorial series, but that doesn't mean there aren't more in the set that you could utilize in some way, shape, or form. I will point out while we're looking at it that if you hit Window and go to the toolbar, if you ever lose the toolbar, it's right here under Window Tools, because sometimes it will walk away. So that's your daily dose of design. If this has helped you, please like, subscribe, comment to the video. If you have any questions or any advice or any thoughts, feel free to comment and let me know in the video. I appreciate any feedback. See you in the next one.